Before the story begins, I would like to encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy scary stories and creepypastas. I write a new story once a week and narrate it, so any support from you guys would be tremendously appreciated. Okay, guys, now on to the story. Cue the clock. My bloody heart is yours. I've never really been good at dating. For whatever reason, I always seem to say the wrong thing at the most inappropriate time. My struggle to find a soulmate has been, to say the least, uneventful. Though I have gone on plenty of dates. Maybe perhaps it's me. I just never seem to make a connection with, well, anyone. So when my best friend Jim asked me to go on a double date with him on Valentine's Day, I was a bit skeptical. "So what do you think, man?" Jim eagerly asked me. I just stared at him for several seconds with a blank expression on my face, wanting to say yes, but something pricked at the back of my mind to say no. "I don't know, bro. How does she look?" I asked back, hoping my lack of enthusiasm would dissuade him. Jim chuckled and realized me asking about her appearance, he knew he had me on the hook, ready to reel me in. "Dude, she's smoking like a freaking 10, he told me. I could feel my stomach grind into knots from anxiety. A bit of sweat accumulated on my brow, but I didn't want to let Jim know. He was my best friend, and he needed me to, quote-unquote, take one for the team. So I reluctantly agreed. "Yes! You won't regret it, dude, trust me. She's going to steal your heart away," Jim said as he patted me on my shoulder, doing his best to hype me up for the upcoming holiday. The dreadful day that I had been hiding from for years arrived, and I contemplated the idea of just hibernating in some cave away from everyone. But I made a promise to Jim, and before I could even get a second to try to come up with an excuse to cancel, Jim had already texted me, telling me he was on his way over to pick me up with the girls. I let out a heavy sigh, and I did my best to swallow my own trepidation as I finished getting ready. I looked in the mirror as I was brushing my hair, and I just stared at my own reflection for what seemed to be hours. The man that was looking back at me was a shell of its former self. I used to be a lot more confident, or perhaps I was just younger and naive. But now, I'm so jaded when it comes to the prospect of finding love. "Come on, just give it a chance, man," I whimpered underneath my breath. Jim blasted his horn from outside, yelling at the top of his lungs while sitting in his convertible, telling me to come outside, along with some other, let's just say, impolite words. I looked out the bathroom window trying to get a glimpse of the girls. I guess the woman that sat in the back alone was my date, and a bit of relief washed over me seeing that she was pretty cute. But the woman that sat next to Jim in the passenger seat, well, she was gorgeous. I couldn't stop gawking at her. Somehow she must have sensed my invasive gaze because she turned towards my direction and smiled. I quickly crouched down, hiding myself from view as I cursed myself, now thinking she must assume I'm some creep. "Come on, bro, stop being such a fairy and get your butt out here. The ladies are waiting," Jim yelled out once again from his car while still blaring his obnoxious horn. I didn't want to get up and have his date leer at me, so I crawled out of the bathroom on my hands and knees in a bit of shame. I headed towards my front door. As I gripped the doorknob, I took a deep breath and wished for a fun night, wanting to find that connection that has evaded me so bad. The missing piece in my heart. As I approached the brightly yellow sports car, I was introduced to the ladies. Irma was my date, a cute brunette that stood no taller than 5 feet. But Jim's date, well, her name was Sandra. She had long, blonde, flowing hair. Her lips were cherry glazed, but most incredulous was her emerald green eyes. She was the epitome of beauty. I think Jim noticed me staring a bit too intensely, because he cleared his voice and told me to get in the car. The night actually proved to be quite fun. We went to a local restaurant, ate some dinner, along with, let's just say, plenty of drinks. Irma was interesting and educated. She told me about all sorts of things, like her studies, and how she was now a teacher. I consistently nodded my head as she spoke, trying to show my intrigue, but without any resistance, my eyes would just veer off towards Sandra, as if they had a mind of their own. For some reason, I had a feeling she knew I couldn't stop looking at her. She would occasionally glance at me in Irma's direction, smiling with those perfect pouty lips. By the end of the night, I couldn't, in all honesty, tell you what Irma had even talked about, but I could tell you detail by detail what movements Sandra did all night, positioning her hands against her alluring chin as she, like me, listened to her date talk nonstop. I was a bit sad knowing the night was about to be over. I just wanted Sandra around me. And to my delight, she suggested that very thing.
Why don't we do something fun? Let's make it a spooky Valentine's Day. Have y'all ever been to the graveyard in the middle of the night?
She said with her angelic voice. I could see the bewilderment in Jim's face take form, his reluctance protruding from his unsettling moves. In the corner of my eye, I could see Irma smiling, looking up at me. But as my gaze remained locked in on Sandra, she turned towards my direction and gave me a little glance. And any reservations I might have had for my own well-being faded, and I agreed. Yeah, totally. That sounds fun. Let's do it, I exclaimed out to Jim's surprise. I could tell he wanted to say no, but Jim has always been a man's man. Him always wanting to prove he was the toughest in the room. So while his eyes displayed apprehension, his voice said yes. As we arrived to the dark and isolated cemetery, we split off into couples, which I was disappointed. The whole reason I was here was because of Sandra. But I told myself that a guy like me would never have a chance with a girl like that. So I went off with Irma, us dissolving into the silence that engulfed us. With the moonlight guiding us, me and Irma found a tombstone to rest upon. She still seemed thrilled to be with me, but was more reserved now that we were alone in the dark. I'm having a fun night, I told her. She just remained silent with her head tilted down. I didn't know what else to say. In the moment, I figured I must have ruined another chance at love. She must have known that I was staring at Sandra all night. I mean, I wasn't even trying to hide my evident amorous leers.
I'm just new at this,
Irma said back in a mere whisper. I stood there perplexed, not knowing what the heck she meant. So I did what any rational guy would have done in that situation. I let out a profound, "What?" As the stars hovered above, silence grew between the two of us. And before I could say another word, she flung at me. Her hand pressed against my chest and started to tear into my flesh, all while she let out a vigorous growl. "Ah!" I yelped out as I pushed her off me. She hit the floor with a heavy thud, but promptly jumped back to her feet like some rabid animal. Blood was trickling down my shirt, and all I could think of doing was running as Irma just stared at me through the darkness. Her snarl became more insidious. I ran through the graveyard, shouting for help, looking for Jim. I know it must have been a sight. A 5-foot woman chasing a 6'2" man, but I knew that thing wasn't a woman. Quickly, Irma caught up to me, and once again, she pounced on top of me. I struggled with her, doing my best to pry her off, but as before, she dug her claws into my chest, almost as if she was trying to pull out my heart. Now, I might be a big guy, but I'm not by any means muscular. So I quickly understood I wasn't going to win this battle, as she clung to my front side, her nails penetrating deeper into my chest. The only thing I could think of doing was falling down face first into the ground, with her hanging on me. So I did. Crack! As I flung all my body weight to the floor, Irma hit the backside of her head against the tombstone. I could see blood oozing from her hair. And soon, I saw that once vicious snarl leave her eyes. She was dead. I got up from off the floor and just stood there in absolute befuddlement, not knowing what the hell just happened. Once snapping out of my delusion, I ran. I had to find Jim. Jim! Where are you? I called out into the brisk midnight air. That's when I heard the most awful screams. A scream of pure horror. It was Jim. And he was screeching out in agony. Jim! I once again called out. I followed the shrieks of pain. By the time I arrived, my best friend lay on the floor lifeless, with an open cavity in the middle of his chest where his heart used to be. And swiftly my eyes crawled up to Sandra. She was eating Jim's heart. No, what the hell's going on? I shouted out, attracting Sandra's attention. She quickly lunged at me and tackled me to the floor effortlessly, her hand tightly gripping at my neck, and she just stared at me. Blood now covered her once angelic face. Where's Irma? She asked as she straddled on top of me. What the hell are you? I asked back, ignoring her concerns for her friend. Her grip on my neck tightened, and she brought her face closer to mine. She had that same ferocious snarl that Irma had. Where's Irma? She repeated once again, this time a bit louder. Fear inundated my senses. Tears gently streamed down my face. I could hardly breathe. With all my strength, I told her the truth. She's dead. Show me, Sandra demanded, releasing her grip off my neck as I gasped out for air. As we walked back to Irma's dead body, I did my best to explain to Sandra that it was an accident, that I was merely defending myself, but me being completely shaken from what I just saw, all I could get out of my mouth was pure gibberish. Yes, that's why things happen when we don't want them to happen. I know she was your BFF, but I gotta say, she was a bit, crazy. I incoherently told her. Just shut up for a second, she told me. I complied and gestured, me zipping my mouth shut. Finally arriving to the location, we both just stood over the dead body. My heavy breathing immersed our surroundings. Sandra turned to look at me, her gaze piercing through my very existence. My heartbeat became more thunderous as what felt like hours passed, as she continued leering at me. I knew in that moment I was going to die. Oh well, I don't like hunting alone, so I guess you're going to be my new partner, Sandra said to my shock. As before, nothing but verbal diarrhea escaped my mouth as I tried to manifest a proper response. Wait, what? Partner, as in business? Partner, boyfriend, girlfriend? Is that what you want, a boyfriend, partner? I yelped out with a shaky tone in my voice. Ha! She cried out. What can I say? Even with all the blood and heart eating, I was still utterly smitten by her. She took a seat on top of a giant tombstone and motioned for me to sit next to her. She explained for the rest of the night in a nutshell how she eats hearts to survive, and how she can make other people like her, that she's been alive for a very long time. She said she could even hear a person's heartbeat from a distance. She then told me she doesn't like being alone, so usually she has a partner, someone to hunt with her. My head ached by the end of the night, or more like sunrise. We talked for hours, and I was still confounded from what she expected of me. Okay, so you're like a vampire? I asked her.
No, how many times do I have to tell you? I'm not a vampire. There's no such thing as vampires.
She yelled out with frustration while grabbing at my face with her hands, squeezing my cheeks together. I just didn't get it. But she wanted me to be her partner. And I have to say, as the sun came up, bathing us in its glow, I could almost see a halo form above Sandra's head. She was absolutely stunning. So I agreed. She told me it was simple. All I had to do was eat Irma's heart, and then I would be like her. Can't you just bite my neck? I told her as I tilted my head to one side.
Not a vampire,
she said as she slapped her face. Sandra then displayed her razor-sharp nails to me and dug her hand into Irma's chest deeply, pulling out her heart. It was black and slimy, as if it had been decaying for years. She held up the heart to my face, signaling for me to take a bite. I could feel vomit squirming up my throat as the stench penetrated my nose. Partners? I asked with the rotten heart still in my face.
Partners,
she said back with her beautiful blood-stained smile. I closed my eyes and took a bite. The taste was horrid, but I forced myself to swallow. Sudden pains erupted in my stomach and I fell to the floor, gripping at my abdomen. I could hear Sandra tell me that it's going to hurt for a bit.
Did I forget to mention that?
She playfully said. Shockwaves traveled throughout my body as I began convulsing on the floor, all while I stared up at Sandra. And then, darkness. I had passed out. As the decades passed, me and Sandra were the perfect team. We complemented each other like ketchup on scrambled eggs. And to be honest, other than the part of eating hearts, it was the best years of my life. We even became closer, eventually falling in love with each other. I would hold her in my arms and she would embrace me in her warmth. It was beautiful. Well, at least it was until I had to tear open some poor sap's chest and devour their heart. Sometimes we would pretend to be brother and sister to hunt our prey. We came up with different disguises. It almost felt like cosplaying. Though, something began to change. I wasn't sure if it was the killing people or maybe life was becoming more mundane. Or perhaps it was just me. Maybe I was the one changing. I started to feel less connected with Sandra. I couldn't place my finger on it, but I came to the revelation she was a bit boring. All she ever wanted to do was eat. I wanted more to this life that I had, and I started going out on my own, hunting on my own. We would constantly argue. Once she even tried to get at my heart. I laughed because at this point I was way stronger than her, and I think she knew that. Eventually, we went our separate ways. She cried and begged me to stay with her, but it's been almost 100 years. It was time to move on. And I know she didn't like to hunt alone, but I didn't want her anymore. A few more decades flew right by as memories of Sandra casually faded away, as I found it more propitious in being alone. Well, not necessarily alone. I met plenty of women. I had more relationships than I can even remember. Usually I would date these women for a few months until I got bored, and then I would consume their hearts. Life was perfect. Sometimes I would just stand in front of the mirror and marvel at my own reflection at how miraculous of a specimen I was. I had no plans on ever falling in love, but unfortunately fate had a very different plan. I was out hunting for my next prey as usual when I saw this one girl that caught my attention. She seemed reserved and timid, but she was absurdly adorable. What really made me notice her was that whenever I stood close, I couldn't hear her heartbeat. I found that quite odd. It left me absolutely confounded. I followed her around for a few days trying to figure out the mystery to this woman. Who was she? How could she have no heart? I finally decided to talk to her. I needed to know what she was. How could she be alive with nothing in her chest? "Hi," I told her as I approached her at the market. She paused with a bit of befuddlement as to why this stranger was even talking to her. But after looking at me for several seconds, she smiled. "Hi," she told me back in her soft voice. That's all it took. That's all I needed. Her name was Emma, and we went out on a few dates. I completely charmed her, and I could tell she liked me by her stare. Her ocean blue eyes followed mine with every movement. The closer we grew together, the more I wanted to know why she had no heart. But I didn't know how to tell her that I knew. Honestly, I found myself utterly beguiled by her, and I fell in love. It wasn't the same as it were with Sandra. That was more lust and hunger than love, but with Emma, it was pure. And eventually I didn't even care about hunting or living longer anymore. I just wanted to spend the remainder of my life with her. Months passed and my enchantment only strengthened. Emma was the missing piece to my life. And with finally feeling complete, I planned on asking her to marry me. The moment was perfect. I took her for a walk, and while she was turned away, I crouched down to one knee and pulled out a ring. As she turned back to my direction, she saw my gesture. She remained quiet and unmoved. Tears began cascading down her face, and she pulled me back to my feet. This is when she told me of her condition. It had some weird medical name that I couldn't pronounce, but it was evident that my Emma didn't have that much more time to live. She told me there was no point in getting married. To say the least, I was devastated. The woman I loved would soon leave me, and I thought hard for days of how I could make this right. Valentine's Day was soon approaching, and an epiphany manifested itself in the corners of my mind of how I could save the woman I cherished. And it could only be accomplished by a selfless act, the ultimate sacrifice. I was going to give her my heart. There was no other choice. Life without her would be unbearable. Memories of when I would dwell away in my small apartment alone flashed in my mind. I couldn't go back to that. So I planned the evening perfect, a ceremonial one. I would take her to the graveyard on Valentine's and explain to her what I was and what she would become. The night was perfect. Moonlight showered us in its soft glow while the twinkling stars blanketed the night sky. The brisk midnight air brushed against our cheeks as we went on our special date. Emma was a bit scared. She held me close, and all I could do is hold her back tightly. I sat her down as we approached a bench. I did my best to explain to her the situation of who I was and what I could do. As one might have expected, she didn't believe me. And it wasn't until I ripped out my own heart did she accept the truth. As I held my still beating heart up to her face, she didn't look frightened, rather astonished. A look of wonderment grew on her adorable face.
You mean I can live longer?
She asked me. I nodded and smiled, happy to the revelation that she was willing to accept my gift of life. All you have to do is take a bite, and all your worries will be gone, I sadly told her.
But that means you...
She didn't finish her sentence. She could see the look in my eye. She knew what would become of my fate. We didn't say much after that. We just stood there in the dark and lonely graveyard, just looking at each other with amorous intent. Finally, she closed her eyes and took a bite of my heart. I could feel my skin crawling. A rush of pain embodied me, and I fell to the floor. I imagined Emma was going through the same thing. I could hardly move. It felt as if my limbs had gone numb, and any sensation of liveliness slowly dissipated, leaving me enthralled in this paralytic state. All I could do was hear my surroundings while my vision became blurry. I was dying. I was hoping to hear the love of my life's voice one last time. A farewell, and I hung on as long as I could, but that's when I heard it. Not my Emma's sweet voice, but laughter. A laugh that was way too familiar.
Hey there, Buttercup. It's nice seeing you again, the voice told me.
I try to move. I try to speak. Hell, I try to do anything, but the only thing I could do is continue listening to that dreadful voice. It was Sandra.
I knew you would fall in love with this girl. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist her, with her heart condition. I planned for her to meet you. You see, I told of her salvation that she would need to eat your heart, and she quickly agreed. Like I told you, I need a partner. And since you didn't want me anymore, I had to find another one. But don't worry, darling. Just take comfort in knowing you saved her life, Sandra told me while giggling to herself. I don't know if Emma ever did love me. And I guess it doesn't matter because slowly my mind drifts into obscurity as I close my eyes and fall into darkness. Hi guys, happy Valentine's Day. Well, it's Sunday, so it's not Valentine's yet, but I hope everyone has an awesome Valentine's. Hopefully you have someone in your life that you want to share that moment with, or hopefully you're happy in your own life. So most importantly, I hope you like the story. I know this isn't really a creepypasta. It's more of just like a scary story, I guess. Not even that scary. I wanted something a little different for Valentine's, so let me know what you think. Leave a comment, like the video, and give me your opinion if I should write stories like this more often or just stick to like creepypasta style. I don't know. Either way, like always, please subscribe to the channel. I really want to grow this community of ours together. So if you have any suggestions for me, let me know. Alrighty guys, like I said, I hope you have a good Valentine's Day and just a good week. And that is it. I'll see you in the next video. Alrighty guys, bye.